organizations offering homework assistance programs, and works with private consultant for parents and children. He's written a guide on strategies for the classroom and after-school guided study entitled Stratégie de réussite scolaire, and has co-authored 4 strategy workbooks for parents. So, Mr. Robert Darche. Thank you. So I'd like to thank the organization committee for having allowed me to present this workshop. This workshop obviously will be presented. It's at a 2.5 hour workshop, which will basically be looking at the 26 letters of the alphabet. And the workshop of accompanying your child, we do make a lot of relationships, make a lot of links with that. Right now, we're passing out a bit of a summary of what I will be passing out over the 26 letters of the alphabet, because I think as a parent, we should really bet on our child, and not as a number in the lottery, but more as something to really as a success. I'm going to give you basically the block letters of the universities. There's M and I, which is a little bit of question on parental implication involvement. There's the strategy as a part of my presentation today, because often when we don't know how to do something, we have solutions. My aim with the strategy here is to give you a whole bunch of little tricks to help my children in his learning. And when we're the better equipped we are, the more effective we are. Often we talk about effort, because in 2016 effort is something which is going down, is not used as much. So we'll talk about effort and really to all of this to encourage success at school. We talk about we're going to for certain children it's elemental. Some children manage it also, they can be very easily motivated. Some that they're not particularly motivated, others who are very well motivated, but they end up being discouraged. So that's why today I want to talk about the importance of developing strategies, and combined with my parental involvement is the 2 important points which will encourage the school success in school. I combine the 2 words in motive action. It takes a motive. It takes motivation to give it. And my child, be he in preschool or high school or elementary, doesn't often have the motivation to really develop this motive action. Because motivation is the action the motive really, which you get some work. Here we go. That's just as important as his intelligence. The motivation of my children is not going to lead to good marks necessarily, but it will allow him to really get into movement. So I'd introduce, first of all, to you a first scale. Motivation scale, which is very important so you understand my role in it. We'll start at the top of motivation. You won't have these in your pictures here. You'll have in your pages there. The first letter up there is intrinsic motivation. That's to say, motivation that comes from inside. So I'll give you an example at home. For example, your child who has an instrument to music to learn, has a song to learn, or some kind of a crafts project or a computer project to do, can spend hours and hours in his room without it being an effort, because the intrinsic motivation comes from inside. We get a lot of pleasure in doing something. If I ask him to, for example, rake leaves outside or pick up his room, is he going to be as long and motivated? Often you're going to say no. That's why these steps exist. And to really understand that if I expect my child to like something, then I'm going to end up waiting for a long time. And that's why there's different levels of motivation. So we come back down to the lowest one before the first step, which is extrinsic motivation. There's the first step called motivation. And motivation comes from our genes. Several children don't have this positive way of seeing schoolwork. They're kids that have a negative active. They're often being treated as being dumb or not good or no good, or you'll never manage, or you never do it. And I explain to my kids that, yeah, maybe it's through repetition, I get the idea stuck in my mind. And that's why I explained these drawings. Oops, went the wrong way. And I explained to my students on this that the subconscious, without getting into a lot of parapsychology, subconscious is a huge recorder which records everything, particularly the negative comments. And if we repeat them all over a long period of time, it's going to end up by actually happening. So what I do is I get my children to look at the positive vision of some of the points that I passed around. I practice with these children a way of developing positive visualization. And by repetition over time, it's not going to be magic, it's not going to happen tomorrow morning, but by repeating it over time as a parent, children are more visual. We're more audio as a parent. We talk and talk and talk, and the more we talk to children, the less we communicate. So going through something more visual, I influence my child to program himself more positively by presenting me the talk. So what I say to my kids is that, if in your head is like a garden. If you plant beautiful flowers, you're gonna harvest good flowers. If you plant weeds, you're gonna harvest weeds. So how do I plant a positive vision in there? It's very simple. A tool that I developed with them. I simply take a piece of cardboard, a fairly big one, with some big letters on it. And I have them write on that quadrant a positive thought or word. Amongst other things, I said here, I want to succeed, or I am stubborn, or another one, I'm a winner, and effort equals success. And then I ask my students, I taught grade 4, I do workshops for high school also, and it applies to all different levels of age, from obviously from 4 years of age. I asked them to stick this up on their beds in the bedroom, especially if they have a work desk in his room. And every time he sees this poster, his brain really registers that, and that's simply called programming, basically. And when my kid starts to put himself down rather than talk, I just point at to have him look at the message which is up on the wall of the room. I practice this with my students. It works. It has a very important impact on them and on my energy as a parent, because it prevents me from talking so much. It's just, again, continuing on the steps of motivation. Step number 2, extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation is something that comes from the outside. I will use an awful lot of my parental involvement in that. How do I do that? My role as a parent, I could talk about that for 3 hours. I'll just be brief on that. When I'm teaching children, I have two roles. I have, first of all, a role as a father or a mother. And now I'm playing an emotional role. I give him affection. I give him love. And I'm going to use this role to motivate my child in the extent that I'm going to create a trusting relationship. I'm going to spend quality time with him through what I'm talking about, through my words. I'm going to encourage him. I'm going to give some concrete examples earlier. But there was somebody, a psychoanalyst from New York, Mr. Bruno Mettelin, who did some research, and he said, right, it's true that love helps, but love is not enough. It takes a second role, as a mother and a father. That's to say, an authoritative role. And when I hear the word authority, I sort of react like that, because I associate that to the 50s and 60s of the role of a father who's a little bit tough and so on. Me at home, unfortunately, or definitely rather at home or in classroom, I'm the authority, I'm the reference person. We're a guide, basically, for the children. And if the children don't have guides, they don't know where they're going, they don't feel secure. And in my role as a guide, then I will give my children a framework. I don't know about you, but when you want to develop a good picture or a good painting up on a wall and so on, and we got some some nice ones up here in the wall up here. We put a nice frame around it. When I say to my kids that I want you to succeed so much that I'm going to put a frame around it, not too tight so that you stifles you, but not too wide either. How do I do that at home? I'll stop, and that's why you get to it. There is the word, the you in there. I'm going to create unity in there with my wife and my spouse. And unity is very important, because if we're not united, that doesn't work. If we try to go canoeing. If we don't paddle at the same time, we're going to be going around in circles. So I want to work in unity with my partner. And then I will find 2 or 3 very simple rules. 2 or 3 simple rules which allows things to work at home. I will write them down because words just don't last. And then with my system, I would apply what I call the 5 C's, as to say clear, concise consignments with consequences. While finding a consensus and being concise. And within any sort of life, if I'm not constant in my training, in my physical exercise and so on, then it doesn't do me any good. So I have 2 or 3 little rules, and associate with that positive consequences, reasonable consequences, and unfortunately negative consequences. Give you a very concrete example. It may not happen in your regions, but in Mascouche, where I was working, it happened often that the child would forget his homework at home. And then we get home, it makes me, and I have to work that much harder with the child. And when it happens often, I can make a rule with that. And in my role as an external motivator, I will find a way not to punish the child, but to encourage him to not forget his work, his material, his homework. To give you a few little tricks. By the way, in the 3rd page of the document that we gave you, to play my emotional role as a mother or father, I give you 25 little tricks which will encourage the child verbally, to show how proud we are with it now. And it's very important. We are the most important person for a child, and every positive word we can give him helps them to build their self-confidence and their self-esteem. Come back to the rules. I chose 2 or 3 rules, and I developed a system that we can use monopoly money. We can use little green or red cards, and every time that the child, and at the end, if ever you're interested. I have some in the back which are sold, which for sale in the corner. It's $2, not the end of the world. I'm not trying to sell them, but I have a series of cards here with the little complimentary words. And then with my child, I cut these things up, and I have these 2 little words. When the child does not forget his work at home, I give him a card. He keeps it, and when he's accumulated these 12 cards, he'll end up with a bit of a privilege. He can sleep a little, go to bed a little bit later, an hour, a half hour more on the computer, a special snack or whatever. Don't want to give it to him right or something coming in, because we're going to end up with some huge reward. Because otherwise, when he gets into high school, you have to buy him a Corvette. But some people say that you're buying the child, but no, I think that we're giving my child a tool to help him to correct a particular situation. I'm not going to give him these little cards for everything. The same thing as a little sticker on a calendar, and when he gets 10 stickers on a calendar, he gets a reward. At the beginning, the child, my kid is going to behave or to do a particular behavior in order to get the word. If I continue with the steps here. Where am I on the steps here? Number 2, introjection. That's why in your documentation there's a letter that says UP. Not UP from the Expos or the Canadians, but UP for reinforcement. Children will react well to reinforcement because it's concrete, it's short term, and it basically shows how satisfaction. there's two types of reinforcement. Verbal reinforcement. Sometimes during the course of a day, things are goes very quickly, and we forget to reinforce them verbally. Bravo, bravo! I'm happy. I'm glad I'm proud of you, and so on. As a result, it says verbal reinforcement. There's also concrete reinforcement, visual reinforcement. For example, your child shows up with a good room without turning him into a king and wanting him to stand up on a pedestal. You just to show how proud I am, I can stick it up in the fridge. The diploma, the report card, or whatever, read it to show just how proud I am. And you make sure. You can be very sure that maybe the child is not going to say thank you, but you make some very strong points with them. I make a communication with the agenda on that also. Every week I give and add a little word to the child's agenda. The queen of the home, the princess at home. You're the princess in the school, and it's not really my to create a reaction. You may have there may be a reaction on that, but I want to get more of a reaction of it. I want to be more in a relationship with a child than a reaction, and over time, my child is going to keep going up these steps up here. If you go up at the top of your integration, maybe somewhat like you, somebody calls you on the phone and it's your son who answers, and you have a good positive comment from someone who says, hey, your son really answers the phone well. You do. We really feel that our son has integrated the values that we've been passing on. And that's a bit of my aim at the same time. But to help that a child in first year high school or in second year high school say to you every night, geez, I love doing homework. I'd like to do homework all weekend. And that's a little exaggerated. And you can be sure that our kids are not. I'm going up and down in these stairs, and really to understand my role as a parent and developing rules and a bit of a framework. I'm not going to expect that the child is going to enjoy doing it, but I'm going to help them to go up these steps. In my school, I developed a system with the little green tickets and really red tickets. I'll talk about the study on that. We on a society working all the time with computers, and patients are really difficult, and still children working at the role is simply going to remember this for the rest of their lives. And I'm thinking the techniques, a very simple technique that I did with the students, in which I used the eyes, the ears, and their hands. And it's proved that when I do these first three minutes, to see something, to repeat it so that they hear it and describe it, I retain 90% of what I'm learning. And I'm developing that. I don't have any homework on that, but I have lessons. And when my children has vocabulary to it and so on, to learn and so on. At first, when I would expect that my children learn that, but I don't think I did. But I develop a system of green and yellow tickets with that for training, to tell them that. Every morning I see if they did their homework, and no. If it's yes, they get a green ticket. If not, then they get a red ticket. And once they have gotten 18 green tickets with the children, I found came up with the children is 15 different positive reinforcements that they to get. When the child did not get it, rather than I gave him a red ticket, and he ended up missing two green tickets. And then my students every year did the 3-year study, not because it's a good result, not because it's a good one, because they wanted to get out doing homework. And they get out of doing all sorts of different things. Me, after 3 months, I was able to get them to understand that it was a really good method. And sometimes I meet students now that are in high school, and they still use the same method. So you see, if I had waited until they enjoyed doing it, it never would have happened. So we do little things to really get them to do things. And we're on the word now. We're going to read E for effort. Making an effort is to overcome a resistance. It's a different of an effort. There is a lot that goes applied to the culture today, because today we're very much into instantaneous. It has to be fast. It has to be easy, and they sell us all sorts of things. which are things which are impossible. Like, that to in order to pay a house or to buy for a car and to raise our kids, it takes a lot of effort. There's nothing magic in that. But we're in this magical culture. We half expect, as a parent, we have a hard time really countering this culture of instant gratification. So in seeing and observing the efforts that can be done, it's a question of the results. So there's your marks in school. We'll often hear teachers and parents and say to a student who's not getting good marks that he's lazy. I worked 35 years with children. I never met a child who was lazy. I came across children who had a hard time learning. Children who often didn't know how to go about it. Often I do a lot of studies in education, and maybe 90% of teachers in Quebec give vocabulary words to learn at home. Only 70% show them how to learn. So it's great that I'd be motivated, but if I don't know how to learn, I can't take a 3-year-old. I can't call a 3-year-old who doesn't know his multiplication tables that he's lazy. That's why I insisted in the beginning that we do the difference between the parental investigation into it and again a commitment on the part of the child. We're now at letter C, and now getting into all sorts of different strategies to help my child to succeed. We started with concentration, a major problem in 2016. I do a workshop on concentration for the last 3 hours. I'll just explain to you the difference between attention and concentration. Two very simple, even words, almost synonymous, but I think they're opposites. Concentration is sensory. It's spontaneous. We're born with that. And I could explain just quickly. Often parents say, Mr. Darche might sit in front of the TV or the computer with playing a video game for 3 hours, and he says that he's not able to concentrate in school. So yeah, because as I explained, attention is spontaneous. But when a child is in front of a television or a video game where it's a lot of noise, a lot of colors, a lot of sequences, sound, and so on, that catches the child's attention. And the real danger with that is that if he consumes 20, 25, 30 hours a week, he becomes trained by attention. Attention, being attentive, our brain works this way. It's being attracted by everything which is distracting. But as you know today, if there's a loom a light over in the corner here, or a noise over this way, we're looking over that way. And concentration is forgetting all this and being able to concentrate on one particular thing. That is something we do, particularly when you're talking at a child who has difficulty in concentration. After having listened to several different presentations this afternoon, you need a lot more effort to concentrate on what we're doing today, and a lot of training also, because concentration is something which is very resistant also. You're resisting at everything around it, whereas attention is just the opposite. So when I do a workshop on homework, I tell the teacher, the parents, that the teachers do it to have as least distraction as possible, because the least little thing can get me off track. And that's the difference between attention and concentration. And in school, it's more they need concentration a lot more. So how can I develop their concentration? First of all, I want to talk, that's why I put the letter W in there, because when I go down there, I try to find a word with W. It's maybe a little bit out of it. A Walkman doesn't exist anymore, but I added iPad at the same time. So an iPad is, I don't want to read it to demonize new technologies, and they use it and then that's good. But what I'm looking for really is, you see, the sun is beneficial. We need the sun. But we nonetheless have to limit how much sun we're exposed to and put on a sunscreen to protect our skin. So we, as a child, when my children is learning 4 basic learnings: language, concentration, socialization, and his motricity, then I have to really put on protective screens on that to to limit the new technologies. It's a little bit that the same way. How can it do that? Move the computer out of his bedroom, put a framework over the time that he's able to use the computer, limit the gamers and so on. Look, you look at the pediatrics who say that pediatricians represent from 0 to 3 years old the least amount of screen time possible. From 3 to 7, maybe an hour a day, and from 7 to 12, maybe 12 to 15 hours a week tops. So we're far from 15, 20, 25 hours. So, but often parents will say, yeah, but what can I do to fill up their time? Because right now the child gets into the car, comes from Quebec to Montreal. I haven't gone 20 kilometers yet, and you need something to keep them busy. So I'll have a screen in the car and so on. So how can I get my child to develop this? Because if I don't have that kind of control, then I'm going to develop a child who's very dependent. I'm going to increase his level of lack of attention to a child, and so on. And at the same time, without really realizing it, the next letter, O, I risk that have a chance of developing a child who is very opposing. What's an opposing child? A child who consumes 25, 30 hours of video games. Or again, I don't really play my role as a parent. As to say, my role as an authority, I find that in principle, I give no rules to my child. So I have a child who's more or less the king child of them. He's tyrannical. He gets upset. He gets mad, and again he gets everything he needs. At the same time, if my child has a lot of fun playing a video game, when I ask him to put it aside and to sit down to learn how to read and to write, that takes an effort on his part. And the child is not trained, not experienced to do that. So he's going to be upset. He's going to be exiled, and that's where you get an opposing child. The same way as a child who doesn't have any rules or regulation when it's time to turn to sleep and put his pajamas on and so on. He's not going to observe. When you give him a rule, he knows he's not going to oppose it because he's not going to get any results on that.
It's one of the problems of the abuse of this kind of tools and create an opposite child. So I use the letter K to develop child's concentration and occupy that time, but has to replace the time spent on the screen. So K is for kinesthesia. It's to develop the manual abilities of the child. And we talk about motor skills, and we realize that in the preschool years, children have a hard time. They learn to use a pen, they used to use scissors, and sometimes the fine motor skills are not that great. And the learning good fine motor skills is essential for a school success. Children are working on iPads today, and there's nothing better than a good pen. When I'm writing with a pen, I'm sending messages to my brain, and I develop my self-regulation abilities. So use fine motor skills and get the youth to work on activities that require patience. When I do workshop on concentration, focus, you tell the parents that if my child can have fun with 5 letters, imagine how much fun he can have with 26 letters. And then we come up with a lot of projects, such as, for example, working on models, working on coloring. I propose to the parents to work on mandalas. What's a mandala? You can afford to see it. It's sort of a circle, it's artwork made with circles. It's cheap therapy because working on mandalas can help meditation and self-introspection. An introverted child will start from the inside out, and an extroverted child will start from the outside in. You can buy that at Walmart. The purpose, painting by number, working on puzzles, working on models. It requires patience, reasoning, time. So I'm teaching my youth, my child, to develop his patience and reasoning abilities and to produce something concrete on which, as a parent, I can put it on his wall and I can build his self-confidence. And also, I'm developing the manual abilities of my child. He can find himself hobbies and passions that he can develop in other fields. Still, in my strategies, I was listening to the principle a while ago. One of the things that can help us with discipline for school success is to build a schedule, an agenda with my child to organize activities at school. So, what's an agenda? Is the ability to set aside time to do things that we don't like and avoid tension when we go from one stage to the other. My goal as a parent is to impose upon my child a break of his pleasant activity to move to a less pleasant activity. So when you go out, if you can just look at the idea, I made up that schedule. So the idea is to put a structure around your child from the time he comes from school to the time he goes to bed, including reading, homework, sports, cultural activities, and so on. And what's good with that schedule is that you have your family goal in there. We respect each other at home through words and actions. And then we put a few rules with positive consequences and negative consequences. So we post it, it becomes a type of visual work, and my child well develops a routine that with time will comfort your child and avoid tensions. Another technique is D for relaxing, actually, détente, so relaxing. So breathing is the fuel for our brain. So in order to properly breathe, by breathing well, I send oxygen to my brain. So I'm going to be more focused. I'm sharing with you a little trick. Before homework, before going to bed, before an exam, during a crisis, to calm down your child. So I borrowed that from a book by Colette Mare. I got my students to stand up, they put their hand on their stomach, and they close their mouth and take big breaths through the nose. They count to 3 and then they exhale. I get them to do that 10 times. At the beginning, it doesn't work because I see all of my hyperactive students being very stressed. Some of them are coughing, some of them don't want to do it. But over time, I do it every day. And by November, I have 27 or 28 youth when I shut down the light, when I turn off the light, who stand up and do their breathing exercise. Sometimes they tell me if I do it 12 times, I'm focused. If I do it 30 times, I'm hyperventilating. And I link it to sleeping. Many kids go to bed, they have all kind of thoughts. So I ask them to do it before bedtime as well. Before an exam. In my school, we ask what is the most stressful in school. It's not the teachers, it's the exams that they find most stressful. Even if your child tell them, okay, we have 30% in my exam and I don't care, it's not true. It affects them. So take 10 deep breaths and visualize yourself succeeding. It's going back to positive thinking and visualizing. Sorry. In the B, which is for youth in 4th, 5th, 6th year in elementary, in high school. Very few kids reread their exams before handing them out. And you could have 58% by not reading yourself and you will have gotten 61% if you did read it. So B is for reading well. So our kids are going too fast, you have to slow them down. R is for reflection. Look at the drawing. It's my son that did that. You can look at the little guy who is thinking, is not laughing, is serious. All of this is to be effective when your child bad marks, comes home with bad marks. It's not up to us. Instead of getting mad, we can breathe deeply and tell our child, were you brave? And then we look at the letters of the acronym. And before he goes to another exam, you just ask him, be brave. You have an exam this morning. What letter is your weakness? That's true. Sometimes it's V, like verify. I forgot to verify before I handed it out. Another trick that works very well, because I work with the Panda Association for the TDAH. I do workshops for them, and I practiced that for 7 or 8 years with my students. I'm sharing with you, and I encourage you to do it, the stop sign. Create a stop sign, put it in the fridge or in the child's bedroom or in the agenda of my child. What is the stop? We were talking about attention a while ago. I have a child who's very attracted to all kind of different things, and he becomes unfocused. So when he sees the stop signs, it reminds him to focus on one topic. It's not automatic. A mom said, Mr. Darche, during homework, as well as I do, that the pen becomes a plane, and the eraser becomes a bomb, and so on. So when I see that my child, the youth, is becoming unfocused, I use the stop sign, and I make a mark on the paper. And at the end, I count all the marks and I try to get my child to beat his record and to have less occurrences of the stop. So I interacted with my youth with a visual support without having to verbally intervene. It works very well with children. All of my students have one on the wall of the room. I have one youth who has it on the corner of his desk, and whenever he gets distracted, the stop helps to bring him back to the teacher's explanation. I'm at T for techniques of studies. I was telling my children, if you're going to study, you may as well study well. It's going to stay in your head for a long time. So here is a very simple way to study. I used it with my students for many years. At the beginning, to encourage them, I will give candies and so on, rewards. How does it work? I talked about it a while ago. Visual memory is short-term memory, and I will forget 90% of what I've seen 24 hours later. Look at our youth. They read, the way they study, they read, and it stops there. So you can use the hearing memory. So the child has a vocabulary word to learn. He sees the word, he visualizes it, and then he will speak it out to hear it out loud, and then he will hide it to write it in a notebook. My students had a binder, a studies binder, and if you want to, there is the fourth dimension, which is also important, but is not there, which is repetition. How can athletes become competent in what they did? Because they practice and practice and practice. Repetition is important. Some youth like to practice hockey, swimming, singing, and they succeed. So I have a trick for that. It's to see, to hear, to repeat. It will help my child to retain about 90% of his studies. So ask your youth to try it for a few months and you'll see that it will bear some results. Still talking about studying techniques, we have J, which is games. G for games. I like to learn through games. Youth. So, for example, for parents of third, fourth grade, with students who are learning difficulties, I'm sharing a game with you. If I see that my youth in fourth or fifth year has been trapped into the comprehensive method, which is the word with the label beside it. There's one out of two children, especially boys, who get stuck in the comprehensive technique, which is more of a guess game, a decoding game. So he sees the word madame, it becomes malade. So I have to translate that part. So to slow them down is if my students have 25 words of vocabulary to learn, they won't learn the 25 words on the first night. Always 6, 6, 6, 6 words a night. 6 words a night for 4 nights. So what you can do here, it's not a reading exercise, it's just an example. You take a piece of cardboard, you write the word on the cardboard, especially for children in first, second, third year. It's an excellent technique. So if I ask my child to read it, I ask the child to recognize the word and he panics. So I'm going to ask him to recognize the sounds. So we have the word malade, it means sick. Show me la. So we ask the child to recognize part of the words or some letters in the word. But if I ask him what it means, he doesn't understand. He says a word that sounds like it sometimes, and his motivation is lowered. So I ask him to put the word in a different syllabus. So I make the word into different parts. I can draw a step and ventilate, write down the words in different parts. What happens if you go too fast in the stairs, you fall. Once he said the different parts of the words, I can ask him to write the word on paper. So all types of memories are involved, and if he got it, you can make a game with him. 1-0. The youth in 6th year has 15 geometrical shapes to learn. He sees them, he draws them. You can ask him again, you can make it into games. So in the 6 words, vocabulary words, if the child has 4 and you have 2, he wins. And it's very encouraging for the child. It helps them to decode things. Maybe he will get to eventually like reading. I can make games with tables. With cards. I use cards and I ask him to add the various numbers on the card. So instead of getting mad when he gets it wrong, you give him 2 choice of an answer and for multiple choice, and that helps him. So in the papers I gave you, we're at N. So you have conflict resolution problem, and it will help my youth to solve problems. If I have a hard time to decode, I'm going to have a hard time to solve math problems, understand text, and so on. So once again, it's a tool that can help you to develop that. Finally, No, not finally. We have R for reading. I'm translating in English because the letters are different in French, of course. Um, Reading, some youth don't like to read. So we are gold diggers as parents. We can propose many kinds of books to our youth, find magic, reads about magic, books with jokes, for example. You have to motivate them to read. Finally, you have the word boy. We're at B for boy. Very quickly, with all of the researchers at the TDAH, we don't really understand what happens with a child. What we know is that when the brain is developing, maturity of the brain, there is frontal lobe in the brain. And in boys, in particular in boys, the development of the frontal lobe, which has all of the executive functions such as attention, judgment, memory, and so on, it takes longer to develop than in a girl. So research shows that a girl will prepare an exam 2 weeks prior to the exam, whereas a boy will wait for the day before the exam to prepare. So researchers believe that the maturity of the brain will keep developing until the 20s. It might explain some of the cause of school success in in boys, and it could also explain some of the causes of ADHD. So, if I have a child like that at home, I have to use my brain to help my boy to mature his brain. F is to foster self-confidence, which is very important for children. We work on self-esteem, we have self-esteem, but that's the value that we attribute to ourselves. And we value our children a lot, but we don't understand why our youth, our child is giving up in front of difficulty. So maybe he has low self-confidence. So I'm sharing that with you. These are different components that will increase self-esteem: love, safety, surrounding, autonomy, pride. This is this is part of my role as a parent. So developing self-confidence through love. At the same time, I give a lot of safety to my child. As I'm surrounding monitoring my child, he trusts that there is someone who is taking care of him and keeping an eye on him and taking care of making sure there's a routine, there are not too much tensions, for example. Now, autonomy, I can give my child responsibilities to help him to be autonomous. For instance, his homework, he has to do his homework, he has to learn his lessons. And finally, with pride, by positive reinforcement, making sure my child is successful, little things like painting by number and so on. These are things that can strengthen my child's self-esteem and self-confidence because he reached a goal. Finally, when we had children with ADHD and they overcame ADHD, children always say, I had parents and teachers who have reinforced me. Just to let you know, my wife and myself were the worst parents in Mascouche with our son. And one day, when he was 21, he sent us a card saying, thank you, mom and dad, for not giving up on me. So if I think I'm going to have a thank you every night, I'm going to be disappointed with a 6 or 7-year-old. But I'm investing in the future. In your document that I give you, there are 10 keys to develop a child's self-confidence. We won't read them. But still to foster routine, to help routine with your youth. What I'm giving you is ammunition to finish the year. So you have a procedural to have a work plan at home. When my child has to work, I want to help him develop his autonomy. I want to reduce the tensions. I don't want to reduce the confrontations. So this is all things that can be done by my child. Over time, it's going to help me to have harmony at school. Cues for exams. I briefly talked about it with the Brave, so it's the same thing. I give you a sheet of paper that explains what we do when there is a good result and what we do when there's a bad result. It's for the child and the parent. So these are guidelines that will help you with it. Plus, you have the Brave, the questions to ask when there is a good and bad performance from your child. You also have preparing the next step. Maybe the report card is coming in. When the report cards come out, it's important. It tells us where our child is. And I always tell my students, a school is like a hockey game. A school year is like a hockey game. There's 3 periods. So let's say you won the first period, but you didn't win the game. So I'm going to make a plan to continue with the second period. And you can help your youth. Let's say you had 62% in reading. How much do you like? What mark would you like to have? He's going to say 90% to please you. So we have to give him a reachable mark, something realistic. That's what we want to do. On the other side, you have lots of tricks to help youth to reach his goal. You can enter into a contract with your youth. You can sign it, you can post it, and when you see that there's a lack of enthusiasm with the youth, you can take it out and show him. To conclude, you have the last sheet that I gave you, which is 7 allies to memory. So nutrition plays an important role in school success at school. Social life is to put aside video games to have an actual social life. Physical activities, sleeping well, avoid video games and LED lights 1 hour before sleep. It's going to help them sleep better. So there is a part on reading, the importance to develop writing with a pen. Finally, remember, the more I talk, the less I communicate. So use other ways to communicate, visual reinforcement, as I shared with you. So my goal in all of that, here is the procedural. I prepare my next step. You have a bunch of strategies, but you have the contract. And finally, this is a visual for you. Work for the future. Don't give up. Don't expect instant gratification. It will come later. So, thank you for your attention. If you have interest, outside I have all of the little cards that I sell for $2. If you want to look at them and make your own, my spouse is there as well. And I'd like to thank the organizing committee for your trust, and thank you for your patience and for your attention. It was a long workshop, but I wanted to go over my 26 letters. So I hope it will help you in the learning process with the children and to continue with the school year. So thank you. Have a good day.